My wife told her coworkers that her husband has no say in her career choices. Those were her exact words, said with the kind of confidence people use when they think they're making a powerful statement about female empowerment. What she actually handed me was the map to her own undoing. I learned about her little proclamation from a colleague of mine who works in the same building. He pulled me aside after a client meeting and said I should know what had been said in her department. Apparently, she had given quite the speech at their team lunch about how she makes her own calls on work travel and doesn't need anyone's permission to do anything. When I got home that night, she was in the kitchen making dinner, humming like she had nothing to worry about. I leaned against the doorway and watched for a beep before speaking. "So, I hear you gave an uplifting talk about independence today," I said. She turned and I could see a faint flush on her cheeks. She knew exactly what I meant but tried to act casual. "I was just telling my coworkers that I make my own career decisions. It's 2024, not 1954, right?" she said as I walked to the fridge for a bottle of water, adding that apparently my view on anything work-related was completely irrelevant. "That's not what I said," she protested. I opened the bottle and took a sip, keeping my eyes on her. "Actually, that's precisely what you said, word for word," I replied, citing multiple sources. She crossed her arms defensively. "Look, they were asking about the Vegas conference next month, and I told them I decide my own travel schedule," she said. "What's wrong with that Vegas conference?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "This is the first I'm hearing about any Vegas conference because it's my job, not yours. I don't need to run every business decision past you." I couldn't help but grin at the irony. Here she was proving my colleague right, live. "You're absolutely right. Your career, your choices. I'm just the husband who apparently has no say in anything," I said. She relaxed, convinced she had scored a point. "Exactly. I'm glad you get it," she replied, pleased. "Oh, I get it perfectly," I said, taking another drink. "When's this Vegas conference?" "Next weekend. Friday through Sunday," she said. "Sounds like a great chance for you to show just how independent you are," I noted. Her voice brimmed with confidence as she went on about how supportive her women co-workers were, how they'd spent lunch talking about modern relationships and the importance of women keeping their autonomy. What she didn't realize was she had just handed me every piece of information I needed. 3 days in Vegas, labeled a business conference, announced to colleagues as proof of her independence. The puzzle pieces began to click into place in my head. That night, while she excitedly called her sister about the trip, I sat in my office doing some digging. The conference was legitimate enough, but she had left out a few details when we had talked. I pulled up the schedule online: professional development sessions, networking events, and plenty of evening entertainment. Las Vegas isn't exactly famous for conservative business atmospheres. This was going to be enlightening. While she kept chatting on the phone in the other room, I started making my own calls. There were arrangements to handle, preparations to make. If she wanted to prove her independence so badly, I was going to make sure she got exactly what she asked for. The next morning she was glowing about the trip, laying out clothes, deciding which sessions to attend. Her excitement was nearly contagious. "You know what?" I said over breakfast. "I think you're absolutely right about making your own decisions. In fact, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." She looked surprised and pleased. "Really?" she asked. "Absolutely. Independence matters in a marriage. Both people should be able to make choices without interference," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Some women at work said their husbands would never be this understanding," she added. "Well, they obviously don't have husbands who truly respect their autonomy," I replied with a smile. What she read as support was actually something else entirely. She had drawn the lines herself, declared her total independence from any input or consideration from her husband, and now she was about to see what that independence actually meant in practice. By Thursday evening, everything had been set into motion. She was busy packing, chattering about the conference and networking chances. She had booked her flight, reserved her lodging, and planned everything solo, just like she insisted she would. Friday morning she was practically bouncing, double-checking luggage and printing a boarding pass, wearing a new dress I hadn't seen before, something more suited for a night out than a conference. "Don't wait up for me," she said, kissing my cheek quickly. "The opening reception runs late and I want to maximize networking." "Of course. Make the most of your independence," I said. She paused at the door. Hand on the handle. "You're being incredibly supportive about this. I know some marriages where this would cause a huge fight," she added. "Those couples obviously don't communicate like we do," I answered. "Have a great time proving how autonomous you are," I said, and after she left for the airport I made my first move. I called a downtown florist and ordered a striking bouquet of white lilies and roses with a card that read, "Congratulations on your independence. May you get everything you're asking for." I had the delivery sent to her office with explicit instructions that her whole team should see it. Nothing says supportive husband like flowers celebrating your wife's declaration of autonomy. Around noon my phone rang. It was her from the airport. The flowers are gorgeous, she gushed. Everyone's talking about how lucky I am to have such an understanding husband. Just wanted to make sure your colleagues know how much I support your career decisions, she said, praising the card as perfect and saying it really drove home the independence point. If only she knew how perfectly it would drive that exact point home. While she was airborne to Vegas, I was making visits. First stop, my lawyer. We had paperwork to review and update, especially around joint accounts and shared assets. Amazing how much legal groundwork can be put in place when someone proclaims she doesn't need input on major life choices. My lawyer raised an eyebrow when I laid out the situation. She actually said that in front of her colleagues, multiple witnesses, made quite the impression from what I gather. And she's in Vegas now for this conference, exercising her newfound independence, I told the attorney. The legal work took most of the afternoon, but by evening everything had been documented and filed. Independence goes both ways, and I was making sure the paperwork reflected that reality. Next stop was the bank. It's surprising how helpful financial institutions can be when you bring proper documents and legitimate concerns about account security. Joint accounts require both signatures to open, but individual accounts follow different rules. The branch manager was professional and efficient. These changes will take effect immediately, she assured me, and all automatic deposits and transfers would be redirected as requested. Perfect, I said. I wanted everything handled correctly. Saturday morning brought a stream of social media updates from her Vegas trip, photos at conference registration, snapshots with new networking contacts, and several images from a lively hotel bar. The timestamps showed those bar photos were taken well after any legitimate business networking would have wrapped. Her calls became less frequent as the weekend went on, and when she did call, her voice had that slightly breathless tone of someone drinking more than planned and sleeping less than necessary. Having an amazing time, she told me during our brief Sunday morning chat. Learning so much about asserting myself professionally. I'm sure you're really embracing that independent spirit, I said. The other attendees are so inspiring, she said. Everyone here understands the importance of making your own choices without external pressure. Sounds like you found your tribe, I replied. What she didn't know was that I had also been calling her office. Not to meddle with her career, of course, but to make sure certain administrative details were updated. Emergency contacts, insurance beneficiaries, that kind of thing. Just being thorough about the independence she had loudly proclaimed. Her immediate supervisor was oddly helpful when I explained there might be changes to her contact info. We appreciate you letting us know, he said. It's important our records are up to date, especially for someone who travels as much as she does. We just want to make sure everything is accurate. She's been clear about handling things independently. By Sunday evening, all the pieces were in place. She'd be flying back Monday morning into a world where her proclamations of independence had been taken quite literally. Her colleagues had applauded her empowerment. Her husband had celebrated her autonomy. Now she would get to live with the consequences. I spent Sunday night cleaning the house and getting ready for her return. Not because I expected a warm reunion, but because I wanted everything immaculate when she discovered how thoroughly her independence had been implemented. Her last social post from Vegas was a group photo at the hotel bar well past midnight on Sunday, surrounded by other attendees who looked like they'd been celebrating their professional development pretty enthusiastically. The caption read, "Last night in Vegas with my new support network, ready to take on the world." Perfect. She was about to get that exact opportunity. Monday morning brought an odd development. She texted me at 6 a.m. saying her flight was delayed and she wouldn't be home until late afternoon. What made that interesting was I'd already checked the airline website. No delays reported for any flights from Vegas to our city that morning. While she was apparently dealing with delays, I got a call from her office. Her supervisor sounded worried. "Is she feeling all right?" he asked. She was supposed to be in for the 9 o'clock department meeting, but we haven't heard from her. Flight delays from Vegas, I explained helpfully. You know how travel can be unpredictable. Of course. When you talk to her, could you have her call in? We need to reschedule her client presentation for tomorrow. I'll let her know, assuming her phone works when she lands, he said. What her supervisor didn't know was I'd been monitoring her social activity over the weekend. The photos told a story that didn't match professional development. Saturday night showed shots from what looked like a high-end nightclub, not a typical conference networking event. Sunday's posts showed her at a poolside bar at noon, then later at what appeared to be a private party in someone's suite, but the most revealing upload had briefly appeared Sunday night before being quickly deleted. A video of her dancing with a man who clearly wasn't a conference attendee, if you judged by his expensive watch and casual attitude about spending on bottle service. She'd been tagged in the video by one of her new contacts before she realized how it might look. I had screenshot the clip before it vanished. Digital evidence has a way of proving useful when people start making claims about business trips and professional development. Around 2 p.m. I got another text from her. Still dealing with airline issues. Might not be home until evening. She was committed to the delay story even though the airline site showed flights on schedule. That's when I made my next strategic move. I called the hotel where the conference was held. I'm trying to reach my wife, I told the front desk. She attended your business conference this weekend and mentioned she might extend her stay. What's the name on the reservation? After I gave the information, there was a pause. Sir, the clerk said, I show that reservation was checked out yesterday morning, but I do see she's registered under a different room for last night. Different room? I asked. Yes, sir. Looks like a suite reservation under a different guest's name. She's listed as an additional occupant. Fascinating. So much for the delayed flight story. I thanked the hotel and hung up. She was still in Vegas staying in someone else's suite while telling me and her employer she was stuck at the airport. That level of deception called for a response to match its boldness. My next call was to her office. This time to HR. I need to update some information regarding my wife's employment records. I told the HR rep. There have been some changes to her emergency contact information and insurance beneficiaries. Of course. What changes need to be made? She asked. She's been very clear about wanting complete independence in her professional life. So, I think it's appropriate that her emergency contact reflects that autonomy, I said. The HR rep sounded puzzled but professional. So you want to be removed as her emergency contact? She asked. Exactly. She's made it clear her colleagues are her primary support network now. I'm sure one of them would be happy to handle any emergencies. This is a bit unusual, the rep said after a pause. But if that's what she's requested, she's certainly been vocal about it. Actually made quite an impression on her team about not needing family input on work-related matters, I added. After updating all the necessary HR paperwork, I sat back and looked at the bigger picture. She was in Vegas lying about her location, staying in another man's suite while expecting me to keep up all the usual marital responsibilities. The hypocrisy was nearly artistic in its completeness. My phone buzzed around 4 p.m. Finally boarding. Should be home by 8. Can't wait to tell you about all the networking I did, she texted. Networking, that was one way to put it. I spent the rest of the afternoon getting ready for her return. The house spotless, her things neatly arranged, and a small welcome home gesture that would perfectly capture the spirit of her newfound independence. Around 7 p.m. I got a call from an unknown number. Is this the husband of the woman who works at Morrison Industries? The male voice asked, slightly slurred and with a noisy bar in the background. Depends which woman you're asking about, I replied. The one who's been telling everyone she makes her own decisions without asking anyone, he said. Real independent type. There's laughing in the background. Then he continued, she's been real vocal about how her husband doesn't get a say in her career choices. Thought you should know she's been putting that independence to good use out here. I appreciated the call and stayed calm. But I'm sure my wife is just exercising the autonomy she's worked so hard to establish, I said. Your wife, man? The caller shot back. She told everyone she was practically single. Said her husband was just someone who paid the bills while she lived her own life. The line went dead, but the message was clear. She wasn't merely declaring independence from my input on work. She'd been actively misrepresenting our whole relationship to justify what she was doing in Vegas. By 8:30 I was starting to doubt whether she was coming home at all. Then I heard her key in the lock and the sound of luggage wheels on the hardwood. I'm home, she called. Her voice artificially bright in that overcompensating way people use when they have something to hide. Time to see how well her Vegas networking had prepared her for the independence she was about to meet. She came into the living room dragging her suitcase, tired but plastering on a cheerful act. Her makeup was a little smudged and she had that special exhaustion that comes from too much drinking and too little sleep. Sorry I'm so late, she said, dropping onto the couch. You wouldn't believe the airline disasters I dealt with today, she added. I was sitting in my chair completely relaxed, with a folder of documents on the side table next to me. Actually, I would believe it. Airline issues can be complicated, I said, and she seemed relieved I wasn't challenging her. Exactly. And the hotel checkout was a nightmare too, she offered. Room mix-ups are the worst, I agreed, especially when you're staying in someone else's suite. The color drained from her face, but she tried to recover. What do you mean? She asked. Oh, I called the hotel when you texted about the delays. I wanted to see if I could help sort things out with the airline. Interesting conversation with the front desk, I said. She opened to explain, then stopped. The confident woman who had declared her independence now looked very unsure. Look, she began, I can explain. I'm sure you can, I replied. But before you start explaining, there are a few things you should probably know about how your independence has been working out. I reached for the folder and opened it casually. First, your emergency contact information at work has been updated since you made it clear your colleagues are your primary support network now. I thought it fitting to remove myself from that responsibility. Her eyes widened. You did what? She exclaimed. I respected your autonomy. Isn't that what you wanted? But you can't just, actually, I said. It turns out that when someone declares they make decisions without spousal input, that principle applies both ways. She started to look panicked. What else did you do? She demanded. Well, I also updated our joint financial arrangements. Since you're so committed to independence, I figured you'd want to manage your own expenses with separate accounts. You closed our joint account, she said in disbelief. I redirected my deposits to a personal account, I replied. Your direct deposit can go wherever you choose. Complete financial autonomy, just like you wanted. She stood up abruptly. This is insane. You can't make these decisions without talking to me, she protested. The irony was perfect, and I couldn't help but smile. Funny thing about that, only last week you told your entire department that husbands don't get input on important decisions. Now you're upset that I didn't consult you before making changes. That was about work travel, not our entire marriage. Was it though? Because according to several sources, you've been pretty vocal about how your husband doesn't get a say in anything, how you make your own choices without external pressure. She was pacing now, her hands trembling a bit. Who told you that? Does it matter? The point is, you got exactly what you asked for. Total independence. This isn't what I meant. Then you should have been clearer about what kind of independence you wanted. She collapsed back onto the couch, head in her hands. Look, Vegas got a little out of hand, but nothing serious happened. It was just networking and having fun. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot of the deleted video. This kind of networking. Her face drained of color. How did you? People post things online, panic, and delete them. But the internet keeps a record. She stared at the image for a long moment, then looked up at me with pleading eyes. It wasn't what it looked like. I was just having fun. I didn't do anything wrong. Define wrong, I said calmly. Because from where I'm sitting, you lied to me about your flight, lied to your boss about being delayed, and spent the night in another man's hotel suite while telling strangers you were practically single. I never said I was single. No. Then what exactly did you tell people about our marriage? She went quiet for a long beat, trying to gauge how much I actually knew. I may have implied that we weren't that close anymore. Huh. So you were testing the waters for independence. It wasn't like that then. What was it like? Help me understand how lying about flight delays and staying in someone else's room fits into professional networking. She began to cry, but these weren't remorseful tears. They were panicked tears from someone realizing the consequences of choices she hadn't anticipated. You can't just destroy our marriage because I had too much fun on a business trip. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply enforcing the independence you announced so publicly. You wanted to make decisions without my input. Congratulations. You're about to get exactly that. But I need. What do you need? She sobbed. Because last week you made it crystal clear you didn't need anything from me about your career, your travel, or your decision-making process. She was sobbing now. I need my husband. I need our life. That's interesting, I said, standing and heading toward the kitchen. Because your networking contacts in Vegas seem to think you were available for a completely different kind of life. Where are you going? To make some coffee. It's going to be a long night and you're going to need to figure out how to handle your independence starting right now. As I walked away, I heard her frantically dialing someone. Probably one of those supportive colleagues who had applauded her empowerment speech. She was about to learn exactly how much support that network would offer when things got complicated. Tuesday morning brought the first real test of the independence I'd put into motion. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when her phone began ringing at 7 a.m. She answered groggily, a voice that suggested little sleep. Hello. Oh, hi, Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson was her direct supervisor, and from the sound of her voice this wasn't a routine check-in. What? No, I'm fine. What kind of emergency? I kept making coffee while listening to her increasingly frantic side of the call. But I told you my flight was delayed yesterday. I couldn't help that. There was a long pause as she listened. What do you mean the client called you directly? They should have gone through me. Another, even longer pause. I don't understand. What paperwork? I glanced at her and saw she was pale, clutching the phone like a lifeline, sitting at the kitchen table in her bathrobe. But you can't just remove me from the account without notice. Now this was getting interesting. I sat across from her with my coffee and waited to see how it would play out. "I need to see those documents," she said desperately. "There has to be a mistake." She hung up and immediately started dialing another number, hands shaking. "Who are you calling?" I asked casually. "HR. Something's wrong with my client accounts. Henderson says there was paperwork filed yesterday changing my status on the Morrison project." "That's odd." "What kind of paperwork?" "He wouldn't say. Just that they received official notice that I was no longer the primary emergency contact." I took a sip of coffee. Emergency contacts matter when info isn't current. She stopped dialing and stared at me, horror spreading across her face. "What did you do?" "I updated your emergency contact information. Remember, you asked for independence from spousal input, so I made sure your employer knew that. But that was just about travel decisions, wasn't it? Because when I spoke to HR, they seemed to think it applied to all emergency contact situations." Her phone rang again, this time the company's main number. "Hello. Yes, this is her." She listened, then went from pale to ashen. "What do you mean there's been an incident? What kind of incident?" I watched her grab a pen and scribble on a napkin. "The Riverside project. But that's not even my account anymore." She listened for a long time, making small sounds of distress. "I understand. Yes, I'll be in as soon as possible." She hung up and looked at me. "There was a problem at a construction site yesterday. A serious safety issue. The client tried to reach me as the emergency contact, and when they couldn't get through, they contacted my supervisor. That sounds like a reasonable escalation. The problem is I was listed as the primary emergency contact for insurance purposes. When they couldn't reach me and my backup emergency contact said I was no longer his responsibility, the client panicked and assumed I was unavailable indefinitely, so they terminated our contract and hired a different firm. A $2 million account gone." I nodded in sympathy. "Emergency contact info matters in situations like that. This is insane. You destroyed my career because you were mad about Vegas." "I didn't destroy anything. I simply respected your declared independence. You said you didn't need input from me on work-related matters, so I removed myself from those responsibilities." She cried again, but with a different kind of desperation. "You don't understand. Henderson is furious. He's talking about putting me on probation. That does sound serious. HR wants to meet with me this afternoon about the emergency contact situation. Apparently, my reliability is in question." Her phone buzzed. She read the message and went paler still. "What now?" I asked. "It's from payroll. They're asking about my direct deposit information. Something about account verification." "Oh, that. I redirected your direct deposit to your personal checking account. Thought you'd prefer to manage your finances independently. I don't have enough in my personal account to cover my car payment." "That sounds like something an independent person would need to figure out," I said. She stared at me as if in disbelief. "You're actually enjoying this." "I'm not enjoying anything. I'm simply putting into practice the independence you demanded so publicly." Her phone rang again. This time she didn't answer. "Aren't you going to get that?" "It's my mother." She probably heard about the work situation. How would she hear about it? Because Henderson called her looking for me yesterday when I wasn't answering. She's listed as my secondary emergency contact. The phone stopped and immediately started again. "You should probably pick up," I said. "Independent people handle their own family calls." She reluctantly answered. "Hi, Mom." I could hear her mother's agitated voice, rapid questions about missed calls and work problems, and why her daughter wasn't handling responsibilities. "Mom, I can explain. There was a miscommunication about contact information." Her mother's voice rose. I caught fragments about professionalism and responsibility and not understanding how this could happen. "No, Mom. My husband didn't do anything wrong. This is just a work issue." Even as she said it, she looked at me with a mix of fear and dawning realization. Her declaration of independence had set off a chain reaction affecting every area of her life. When she finally hung up, she sat in silence for several minutes. "This isn't what I wanted," she whispered. "What did you want?" I asked. "I wanted to feel empowered at work. I wanted my colleagues to see me as strong and independent." "Mission accomplished. You're about to be completely independent." She looked up, desperate. "How do I fix this?" I said, standing to refill my coffee. That's exactly the sort of decision an independent person makes without input from anyone else. By Thursday, her independence had become wonderfully complete. She sat at the kitchen table surrounded by bills, bank statements, and job application printouts. The woman who had declared she didn't need anyone's input was now learning what that actually looks like. Her HR meeting had gone badly. When asked to explain the emergency contact changes, she couldn't give a coherent answer without admitting her husband had removed himself because of her public independence declarations. The discussion shifted from administrative questions to concerns about her judgment and professionalism. They're transferring me to a different department, she told me without looking up. Lower pay, no client contact, basically starting over. Sounds like a fresh opportunity to demonstrate your autonomous decision-making skills, I said. She didn't answer. She was too focused on figuring out how to cover expenses with a 30% pay cut. Her phone rang and she picked it up with the weary tone of someone who'd stopped expecting good news. Hello. Yes, this is her. I could tell by her posture this wasn't a work call. What do you mean the lease application was rejected? I submitted all required documents. Apartment hunting. She'd been looking for her own place since Tuesday, presumably to complete her independence. Credit history, but my credit score is fine, she argued, listening and jotting notes, asking increasingly desperate questions. I see. No, I understand. Thank you. She hung up and stared at the phone. Problem? I asked. The apartment I wanted required proof of stable employment and income verification. Apparently, being on probation doesn't count as stable employment. And without joint account history, she lacked the financial background to qualify a loan. Independence can be expensive. She finally looked up. You knew this would happen. I knew actions have consequences, I answered. You declared you didn't need input from me on major life decisions. This is what that looks like. But I never meant what you meant doesn't matter anymore. What you said publicly, what you did in Vegas, and what you're dealing with now are all connected. You wanted to be seen as completely autonomous, and now you are. Her phone buzzed again and she read the message, shoulders sinking. My mother wants to know if I'm moving back home since I'm having career trouble. Are you? I don't know. I don't have anywhere else to go right now. That sounds like exactly the choice an independent person makes for herself. She sat in silence a long time, staring at the bills. The women at work, she whispered, the ones who backed my independence speech. When I tried to talk to them about what happened, they told me I should have thought through the consequences before making such bold statements. Wise advice. One told me I was naive to think I could have it both ways. Either I'm independent and handle everything myself, or I'm in a partnership and act like it. Which one are you? She looked at me tearful. I thought I could be both. I thought I could feel empowered at work while still having security at home. You can't declare independence from half a marriage and expect the other half to remain unchanged. I know that now. Do you though? Because knowing and accepting are different things. She wiped her eyes and started gathering paperwork. I need to figure out what I can afford for rent with my new salary. Good luck with that, I said. As she headed up the stairs with her documents, she paused and turned back. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about Vegas. I made poor choices. Yes, you did. And I'm sorry about the things I said at work. I was trying to impress people. Also true. Is there any way we can, what? Work this out, fix things. I looked at her standing there with bills and job applications, finally understanding what independence actually cost. That, I said, is exactly the kind of conversation that requires input from both people in a marriage. But since you're committed to making your own decisions without outside pressure, I guess you'll need to figure that out independently, too. She stood another moment, then went upstairs to continue planning her autonomous future. Her colleagues had been right about one thing. She was certainly getting everything she had asked for. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've picked 2 other videos I think you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.